Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. I'm here today with Blair Enns. Blair, welcome to the pod.
Thanks, James. My pleasure.
Very, very nice to have you on, all the way from Canada. So I'll just quickly introduce you. So Blair is the founder of Win Without Pitching, and also the author of the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, Pricing Creativity, as well as the 4 Conversations. He's the co-host of the very popular Two Bobs podcast, which I was saying before recording that it's one of the podcasts that I listen to religiously. Blair, you're a world-leading authority on selling and pricing creative marketing as well as professional services. And we were also chatting off air, and the audience for this podcast are largely Australian in-house marketers, although we do have some agency side listeners as well. So I think most agency side, particularly principals and owners in Australia, are, follow your work, have read your books, listen to your podcasts, your thought leadership material. For in-house marketers on the session, maybe less familiar with your work, but I think really interesting to kind of go through some of your work, I guess the principles that you kind of teach to principals and agency owners like myself. And I do think there's so much overlap and interest for in-house marketers as well. So maybe to kick things off, could we kind of go back to how Win Without Pitching came to be?
So the first book, the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, I published in 2010. I launched the business that is Win Without Pitching in 2002, so 8 years prior. I was a solo consultant serving independent agencies, helping them get better at selling their services. And the value proposition is right there in the name of the business, Win Without Pitching. I was effectively in the business of deprogramming agencies of their need to give their highest value offering away for free. So I had been doing that for about 8 years. And in that 8 years, I'd felt pressure. I see myself as a writer first, probably, and an entrepreneur and consultant second. And I'd felt the pressure to write a book, and I was just waiting for the right package. And I wrote a post one day called 12 Proclamations for the New Year. And that post blew up, and I realized, okay, that's the book. So that's the genesis. That's the genesis of the book.
And can we just talk around the principles of the Win Without Pitching Manifesto? And because I think often there is this divide, right, between in-house marketers, how they put a tender together, how they put an RFP together, how they think they're serving their business. And often there is this gap between the agency viewpoint, the agency perspective, how challenging and difficult it can be to kind of respond to some of those more traditional pitches and tenders. So if we could just talk around, full disclosure rather, we've worked with Blair, we've gone through your program. I mean, you actually were the reason that Smarter Marketer came to be, right? In terms of getting agencies to lean into thought leadership, publish a book if you can. That kind of led to the podcast. And so, we're obviously huge believers in the methodology, but what is the core philosophy behind Win Without Pitching?
Well, again, the value proposition is right there in the name, this idea that you should be able to secure the business without having to give your highest value product away for free in a pitch. And when I launched the business, I picked up and moved my young family to this little remote mountain village in British Columbia, Canada, and had no way to earn a living. So I thought, well, I had to do something. And I was working in the agency business. I worked for some of the largest ad agencies in the world and some of the smallest design firms in the world on the account management and business development front. And I was always struck by the ridiculousness of how agencies sold their services. Now, so I advise people on the seller side, right? Agencies, but a pet project for a couple of years of mine was doing a podcast on the subject of marketing procurement. And during the 18 months or so that podcast was live, my co-host and I interviewed a lot of people on the buy side. So we interviewed marketers, we interviewed marketing procurement people. And I like to get a sense of both sides of the of the relationships. It's selling creativity is it's hard to do, and it's probably harder to buy it than it is to sell it. I liken it to a drug deal where the agency says to the client, "I got some really cool shit."
So
And
where I thought this conversation was going to go, but I'm here for it.
and the client says, "Oh yeah, I'm interested in some really cool shit. Can I see it?" And it's like, no, you got to pay me first, and then I'll give it. Well, can I try just a little bit of it? Right? It's like, okay, you say it's great. I kind of believe you. I hope it's great, but I need to try it before I buy it. And after that, the metaphor, the analogy kind of breaks down. But that's how I think about it. It's like, the agency has this promise of, we're going to come up with some ideas that are going to be revolutionary. They're going to create all this value, going to blow your mind, going to help you accomplish your goals. And there's this kind of implied promise when you're selling creativity of like, oh yeah, it's going to be, you can't even imagine how good it's going to be. It's hard to buy that. It's hard to buy that. So the buyer, the client, invites the agency to cross the line that separates proving their ability to do the job from actually doing it. It's like, well, bring me some ideas, etc. And agencies are conditioned to just sell that way. And it's not the best way. It's expensive for the agency. And at the end of the day, it's usually this kind of client-directed arm's length selection process where even when the agency does good work and wins the business, that work gets thrown out and then they start all over again. Now, so the core principle or principles behind Win Without Pitching, first of all, value yourself. Second of all, recognize that you have to make it easier for the client to buy. If you want to get out of the free pitching business, which is really expensive, you need to have an alternative. So that alternative, if you think of the first proclamation of the 12 proclamations of the Win Without Pitching Manifesto, the first is, we will specialize. So first of all, you have to build a meaningfully different business. You have to be seen, if you want to be seen as more expert, then you effectively have to be differentiated, which means narrowing your focus. So back in 2010, it wasn't exactly heresy, but it was a hard message for creatives to stomach. This idea that you can't just be an ad agency or a design firm, that you need to either specialize in a vertical or a discipline. And today, because the market's just been further fragmented as more time goes on, everybody kind of recognizes the value of that. But back then, the starting point was, well, it's hard. You have to pitch your services for free because the client sees you as no different from 5 or 10 or 15 or 1,500 other firms just like yours. So start at the beginning, build a meaningfully differentiated business. And then in the sale, if the client recognizes and values your expertise, instead of starting to solve their problem as proof of your ability to do so, offer another path forward. So you just be more systematic about how you think about the sale. Think of it more of a sale, honestly, than a pitch. And one of the things you would do is just break the sale up into smaller steps. Recognize that this is a big commitment you're asking the client to make. It's fraught with risk. Do whatever you can to de-risk the engagement. Break it up into smaller steps. Offer a money-back guarantee, perhaps, on the first step. Let the client... So instead of pitching the final solution and blowing your brains out on all these resources on kind of the fun stuff, the creative execution, see if the client will pay you a little bit of money to start working with you at the beginning, to work with you on quantifying the problem, diagnosing the solution, coming up with the strategy, etc. Break it into small steps. Be open and conversational about it. Break down the barriers to purchasing your services. And a big one is this kind of arm's reach, keep everybody at arm's reach, brief and present dynamic, where the client says, here's what we want to see from you. You lob something over the fence. Then they invite you to come in and present. They say, okay, thank you. We'll get back to you. And there's no real conversation. And my most recent book is called The Four Conversations, because one of the key principles is get out of the presentation business. This should be a series of conversations.
Yeah. And sitting on the agency side, we're kind of fortunate where we generally will not engage in RFPs and tenders where we haven't had that opportunity to actually go through our process and make sure that we're having proper conversations with the prospect and understanding the problem and the dynamics and what those things might be. But it's almost impossible to put together your best solution if you are held at arm's length, right? It's just impossible to truly understand what you're actually trying to solve.
Yeah, think about it this way. Anybody who's really good at what they do has a defined, codified way of doing it, right? So you hire somebody to dig a ditch in your garden, and if they've done this before, they will have something as simple as digging a ditch. They will have a system. They've done it enough. They have a way of assessing the ground, determining the tools, determining the shape of the ditch, the depth, etc. And we take all these things in a simple task like ditch digging for granted, but anybody who's done it a bunch of times has a way of doing it. It's the same way in the agency business. And what clients do in a pitch is they come to you and they say, I don't care about how you do this. You're going to follow our methodology and you're going to give us some ideas on our self-diagnosed problem, self-prescribed solution. Give us some creative ideas. Skip over all the really valuable stuff that you do at the front and just hit us with some ideas. Wow us with some ideas.
Yeah.
So they're asking you to put your, the way that you get results. The reason you're at the table is you have a history of performing and creating certain results. And the way you create those results is you go through this methodology that you refine over the years. And then in the pitch, the client says, we want to try on what it's like working with you, except you can't work your way. You have to work our way. It doesn't make any sense.
You wouldn't want to take that approach with your doctor, right? Where you go in and kind of come to them with the problem and your approach to the solution. And, I think I'd probably like to lean into their expertise on that one.
I talk about that a lot. You walk into your doctor's office and you say, I have this pain in my chest. I think I need quadruple bypass surgery. And the doctor thinks to himself, that's probably just angina, but you're the customer and the customer is always right. So lie down, I'll catch you open. There's a word for that. It's called malpractice.
I like that. It's a good one. What are you seeing? And I think the Australian market is slightly different to the North American market in this one, but what are you seeing with bigger picture specializations, agencies going down a path where they work with a particular vertical or work in a particular area? And here you'll have all different types of makeups, and often CMOs, senior marketers have a preferred way of working, right? They'll kind of have an agency village, or they'll work with one agency. They'll have a preference to try to get things done in a slightly more full service manner. My observation of the North American market is just the sheer size of it means you do often have more specialization. You'll have in the digital space where we play, I've seen firms that do nothing but Google map optimization for businesses, so auto dealers, where in Australia, you'd struggle to build a business big enough for that. And potentially you can go global, right? If your market, if your niche is surgical enough, but often in Australia is this kind of desire to work with local agencies. Are you seeing like further specialization, or are you seeing things starting to move back to kind of full service or full service in a particular vertical? Like what are the trends you're seeing more macro?
So I'm not seeing any trend back towards generalist firms. However, we are in the early days of people using AI. So what I see is a fully bifurcated market, where on one side you have the big, large, usually global, but not always, generalist firms. And then on the other side, you have highly specialized firms, many of which you couldn't have even predicted would exist years ago, like 5-10 years ago. And these firms on the specialized side, I tend to think of them as creative firms. They tend to be a blend of some form of design, consulting, just professional services generally, software engineering, and increasingly under the banner of software engineering, also AI.
Yeah.
So they even defy description. But I see the market is, it's really two different markets, and it's the largest firms. So global clients have a need for global agencies. They tend to go with the big ones. And then the smallest clients sometimes go with more generalist agencies too. And the Australian market is about a little bit smaller than the size of the Canadian market. It's not a very big market. So you do get specialization, not to the degree that you would see in the United States or in the UK. Like, I remember when you guys specialized in digital, that was pretty niche back in the day. You were pretty early to that move, weren't you?
Yeah, I think so. And the way you described it is true. And I can't remember where I was reading the stat. And I think we don't get great data in Australia, I think, like on many things. But the number of agencies has kind of quadrupled in the last 10 years or something like that. And just this volume of sole traders or 2 people or 3 people creating an agency and focusing in a particular area, right? A lot of work is kind of being done there. And the globals is true here as it is anywhere, right? Which is, if you're working with a global brand, then those relationships get signed in New York and London and wherever else. And often my observation of that is often here, the local team working in that brand get very frustrated because often the markets that matter are the USA and particular markets in Europe, and the relationship down here is kind of inconsequential, but their hands are often tied where they then can't use a local indie firm. But then just depending, sometimes those kind of satellite offices will have discretion to use local agencies, and local well-organized indies, like similar to Rocket and other really well-organized independent agencies, will often be quite sought after there because you probably are getting a little bit more love and a bit more expertise applied.
Mhm. And there are, like you and I were talking before we hit record, about a mutual friend of ours who's a specialist in the property space, and he's got, it's not exactly a global reputation, but his firm is well known outside of Australia, quite a ways outside of Australia. So occasionally you see success stories like that, and that happens through specialization.
Yeah, I
But
remember.
you're right, the trend of agencies getting smaller, and the tools are just enabling a smaller number of people to do more. So I don't see that trend reversing anytime soon.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I remember when we were working together initially, it was the observation, which is the more specialized you are. And I think it's interesting since hearing you say it, I kind of take it outside of agency world, outside of marketing, but the more specialized you are, the greater your geographical reach. And it doesn't, if you're the greatest heart surgeon or heart specialist in Canada or Australia, people will travel to see you, right?
Yeah.
Then if anything you're doing that's quite commoditized in general, then you'll have 3 or 4 in your local area, and your geographical reach will be people pretty close to you.
Yeah. And there are exceptions. Like, there are, like, within the broader design profession, there are just the rock stars who are, they get famous and they're asked to do all kinds of different things. And I think for many years, many creative firms were influenced by, they would look at the rock stars, kind of like the Vince Frost, or
Mm.
in New Zealand, I'm a big fan of Alt Design Group. They have a big cult following. They'll get hired to do things that they've never done before because of the cachet that they have.
Yeah.
But that's not something that the 99%, the rest of the market can model afterwards. For the rest of us, we need to specialize and go deep into something. And if, to your point, the farther we want to travel, the more we need to be specialized.
Yeah, totally true. In terms of moving then into your second piece of work, pricing creativity, can we maybe just talk some of the bigger concepts there? And because I think it is interesting, I do think a lot of your work there has shaped how the proposals and the quotes that in-house marketers are probably looking at have been in many ways impacted and designed through your work. So I think if I was an in-house marketer listening, it's like, it's something I want to know, right? Like how.
Yeah. So a few years ago, you started to see 3-option proposals, many of them just 1 page.
I was actually applying this, we're probably moving off topic here. I was one of my children has a fundraiser, and he's quite entrepreneurial. He's 10, and he was asking me how he can get more money from family members, and I did feel this is like really kind of arming. This is going to come back and haunt me at some point into the future. But we're kind of talking about we're doing some Robert Cialdini principles, and then I started talking about anchoring, and I was referring to you, and I was saying that the number you're going to put to your uncle, it doesn't even have to relate to anything else. It could just be a number we pull from elsewhere. We can also start talking about how other people's uncles have donated as much as X, and we'll frame him high. So sorry, I probably have jumped in front of your work there, Blair, but it'd be good to talk about it.
It's great to hear you poisoning young minds. I didn't invent the multi-option proposal. I didn't invent the one-page proposal, but I certainly did a lot to popularize it in this space, in the creative firm space. And I think, when I talk about this to some agency people, some people feel like it's manipulative, but I have been on the buying side of numerous proposals. As soon as somebody, if I want to hire a marketing firm of any kind, they force me to eat my own dog food. So they give me a one-page 3-option proposal, and they walk me through the different options, beginning with the high anchor. And when it's done properly, and it's not hard to do it properly, when it's done properly, it really is empowering to the client. So on the client end, you've got a budget. You know what the problem is. You think you know what the solution is. Maybe you even spec'd out the solution and you've assigned a budget to it, and you give it to the agency. So you're self-diagnosed and self-prescribed. And when that happens, and there's no crime in that. I do that to my doctor all the time. I show up after having consulted Dr. GPT, and I say, here's what's going on. Here's what I think I have. Here's what I think I need. And then the doctor smiles politely and kind of puts my work aside and then goes through their own diagnostic process. And that's the way it should work. So if you think of, you're hiring a creative firm, what is creativity? Creativity is the ability to see. It's the ability to bring a novel perspective to a problem. So when you go to an agency and you say, I know what the problem is, I know what the solution is, give me a price, or here's my budget, you are really proposing to hire them while keeping them from using their superpower. Their superpower is the ability to think about the problem or the solution differently than you've been thinking about it. So how does the agency politely push back on that? And one way to do it is to come back and say, all right, well, I've talked to the team about your challenge and the conversation that we had, and I have 3 different ways that you can engage us at 3 different price points. Now, you told me you had a budget, you told me you wanted X, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to push you to think a little bit bigger. I ask my team to think creatively and expansively about what's the most that we could do to help these people create this value. Now, hold on to your hats because it's a really big price, big number. But here's what it looks like. Let me walk you through it. And in that option, that most expensive option, that is the provocative option. Their job is to push you outside of your comfort zone to think differently about your situation. And you don't have to take that option, but the way I say to my clients, position it as a trade. Yeah, I'll give you a price on the thing you asked for. In exchange, you let me think creatively and expansively about, and come back with some other ideas at higher prices, different ways that we could create this value for you. So they come back and they start with the provocative option, and it pushes you, inspires you when it's done properly to think differently about the situation. That is adding value in the sale itself before you even hire them. And then they say, all right, you had a budget for X. Here's what we can do for X. And then I've got another one in the middle. It's a little bit between what you asked for and the provocative thing. Now, 3 different paths. Let's talk about the pros and cons of each. And ultimately, it's your decision. Which one do you want? I love being on the buying end of that conversation. And I don't understand why people are familiar with this technique, but have a hard time bringing themselves to do it. I think it's the best thing for the client.
And it comes back to earlier part of the conversation around, are you an order taker or are you an expert? And if your job is to be an expert and um, the trusted advisor and professional service operator, if someone comes to you with a problem, it's kind of your duty to respond with, this is how we solve it. And that may or may not fit the budget that has been potentially ascribed to it. But it's, if you want to actually solve the problem, this is the way to do it. It kind of
Yeah.
feels like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. It's back to the doctor saying, well, it's probably just angina, but you're the customer. You want open heart surgery? Sure.
Yeah. And I remember, I think, I'm not sure if this is in one of the books or maybe a podcast that you published on it, but the idea being that, and this is information you're giving to agency side, which is never put an option in front of a prospect or a prospective client that you're not happy if they take,
Yeah.
and that isn't in their interest as well. So it doesn't mean you have to just regurgitate whatever they've put forward, but it's not about gouging or doing the wrong thing. It's about actually putting forward options in the true sense of the word.
And sometimes for my clients on the agency side, that I've got to get them to embrace this idea that there is more than one right solution for the client. A lot of people get locked into, oh, here's how we do things here. This is what the client really needs. I think, and I often say that it doesn't matter how good a salesperson you are highly unlikely to uncover all of the trade-offs the client needs to make in the decision to hire you, to accept your proposal. Therefore, it's somewhat negligent to not put forward some options. And to your point, James, each of those options you should be okay with. There's no gold, silver, bronze. There's no good, better, best. There's no judgment in the options. It's simply like, how much do you want to pay? How much uncertainty do you want me to make go away? How much of a concierge level service do you want? How many add-ons? It's just, there are an infinite number of ways to put together a solution for the client, even with the client who thinks, I know what the problem is, I know what the solution is, here's the specifications, just give me a price on this. Again, to just give the price, that's kind of malpractice, right? You can say, here's the price, but in exchange, let me push you to think bigger.
Yeah,
It's win-win for everybody.
Yeah, no one's buying tactical inclusions. They're trying to buy an outcome for their business, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's 3 blog articles or 15 creative outputs, whatever it might be, there's still layers within each of those areas. Within pricing creativity, and it's also touched on in Win Without Pitching, but a core philosophy of yours is value-based pricing. So I think it'd be just interesting to kind of talk to that concept for those listeners, in-house marketers who might not be aware of how that works. And it's kind of interesting for us. We've been in this space. We've been working within this kind of pricing methodology for a very, very long time. And it still astounds me that, particularly, it often is at that kind of holding group level where so much work is still just done on an alley rate. But we could just talk about value-based pricing, what it means, what it is, what it's not. And if you were kind of sitting on the buy side, how you'd be viewing that.
Yeah. So value-based pricing isn't universally the right solution for the seller or the buyer, but it's the one in which the incentives are most appropriately aligned. So think of it this way. As the buyer of creative services, there are really only 3 things that you can buy. You can buy time and materials, so an hourly rate. You can buy the deliverable, the website, the blog post, whatever is being created. Or you can buy the value to be created, the revenue that accrues from the increase in traffic and times the conversion rate, et cetera. So if you're paying for value, if I say to you, James, yeah, I want to, flip it around and I come to you and I say, I want you to create a bunch of blog posts and these lead generation assets, basically. How much? You could propose to say, just give me an hourly rate. I say I have a budget of $10,000, and you say, well, for 10,000, I could sell you some hours. But if you want, Blair, you said you wanted like a specific number of blog posts. We can give you those blog posts. Forget about hours. We'll give it to you for 15,000. And I'm just riffing on the numbers here,
Yep.
right? So you're giving me price certainty at 10. If I buy the $10,000 worth of hours and I say to you, well, are we going to get these 3 posts done? And you say, well, I don't know. You're taking all the risk, right? If you're buying time, you, the client, you're taking all the risk. We're going to get it done. We'll try our best. But if we're not done, we're not done. You have to buy some more hours. And maybe you say it's, minimum block of 10,000 or 5,000. So the buyer, I'm taking some risk. But you might say to me, for 15,000, I can give you those 3 blog posts. So now I'm paying a bit of a premium, but I'm getting price certainty. I know what the price is going to be at the end. But if you're any good at selling, you will have a value conversation with me and you'll say, tell me more about what you want these blog posts to achieve. I want to increase traffic. Okay, well, what's the state of traffic today? It's X. What do you want to get to? Y. I want to get it to Y. Okay, what happens if you get it to Y? What's the value of getting it to Y? Well, at our current conversion rate, revenue goes from this to that. Okay, well, this to that. At what margin? 20% margin. Okay, so we're talking about if this works, then what you're really looking for is you're willing to increase the top line to X and the bottom line to Y. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, well, I could sell you some time. I could sell you those 3 blog posts. But if you want to get creative, and if you want us to take kind of the shackles off in terms of like limiting hours or deliverables, why don't you hire us to work with you until those outcomes are achieved? And we'll charge you $40,000 or, whatever whatever the number is. It's a function of the value to be created in your role in that value.
Yeah.
So now you're giving me, the buyer, an option. I can buy the value to be created, and you might put some parameters around, we'll work for this long, this number of iterations, this number of people on it, etc. But we'll effectively work with you and tweak it until the time period is up where we hit that number. And the goal is to hit that number. So I can buy that from you. I can pay a lot for that and get what I really, really want. Or I can save my money and not be guilty of wasting money and just buy some hours from you. And I can say to my boss, well, I spent the $10,000 budget and I got 3 okay blog posts. What were the results? Well, they were okay, but not great.
When are the times where you find value-based pricing isn't the most suitable for either party?
Well, on the buying side, if procurement's involved, procurement does not like value-based pricing.
Yeah.
They want to buy units. They want to buy inputs or outputs.
Just certainty.
There's also value-based pricing is true partnership. So you have to both trust each other, and not just the people working with each other. If your client is I'm speaking to the agency people here, if your client is a big organization, you have to have a trusting relationship you have to, across different levels of the organization. And that's particularly important if you go to the next level of value-based pricing, and that's performance pay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go back to that example of proposing to get paid $40,000 based on results. You could tie it explicitly to results and say it's $20,000 in fees and $20,000 is going to be payable based on us hitting these certain metrics. Now you've got some skin in the game. That's partnership. True. Yeah. I wrote a post on this called "You Don't Really Partner with Your Clients." And the truth is, from an agency point of view, there are a lot of your clients that you would not partner with because they would not make good partners. And the inverse is almost certainly true as well.
Mm.
So you partner with somebody when your financial goals are aligned. That's partnership. But let's say I'm selling to you. You're the in-house chief marketing officer. You're a large organization. Procurement's going to get involved. There are many, many cases of agencies working on a performance basis like this, hitting the KPIs, earning the incentives, and somebody in finance or procurement goes, I don't care if we have a contract. I can't pay this. It's not budgeted for. I'm going to lose my job. I am just not paying it. that happens. So you do have to trust the partner that you're working with.
Yeah, we had an instance like that a few years ago where we working with a team that was very finance driven and were obsessed with a particular metric, which we felt was less important than they thought it was to kind of further down the line commercial success. And that was the number that we agreed on to incentivize, and we kind of hit it out of the park, and it was not received very well because exactly as we'd kind of forecast, it wasn't going to move the needle further down. But that's we digress a little bit. In terms of pricing creativity, when did that come out? That came out
2018.
2018, yes, it's 7 years ago. What then made you put together the most recent book, The Four Conversations?
Yeah, because in some ways it cannibalized the work of pricing creativity because it does cover the basics of that are covered in the pricing book. But I wanted to put our entire model out there. So we have a training workshop. It's called the Win Without Pitching Workshop, where we train you on our model, which is the four conversations. It's the model. We view the sale as a series of four linear and discrete conversations. All models are wrong. Some are useful. And I deliberated on this for years, but I felt like if I could put the model out there in the world, then in our training programs, we could spend less time imparting information to people and more time just practicing the conversations. And that meant that I had to include some pricing information that was already covered in pricing creativity.
Yeah, it makes sense. And so what does the training side of the business look like at the moment? Like what kind of work are you doing? What sort of clients are you working with?
So when we started the business in 2002, or I started the business in 2002, the target market was always, I defined it as creative professionals, typically people in the advertising and design professions. Then as the years go by and the businesses get more specialized and fragmented, creative services kind of starts to merge with professional services. And in our training programs, as the years went by, we had more and more outliers, people who were not creative professionals, not from creative firms. We'd start to get consulting firms, engineers, architects, which are creative, staffing companies, financial planning firms, et cetera. And at some point, the outliers almost equaled the number of creative professionals. So when I wrote The Four Conversations, a new model for selling expertise, which came out at the end of 2024, that's when I broadened out the audience in the book and the focus of the audience for the business. So today we describe our target market as somebody who is an expert first, either an advisor or practitioner of some kind, and a salesperson second. So they signed up for the first job and then learned, if you want to do that first job, you have to also do the second job called selling. And for most people, it's not intuitive or comfortable to them. So our target market is an expert who also has to sell. Their second job is selling.
It's kind of the business of expertise, I guess, is kind of the space you're playing in.
Yeah, to use David Baker's description for the space. Yeah.
It's like someone you work really closely with has written a book on and said,
and I gave him the title.
I didn't even connect the dots on that, I promise, boy. What are your, where do you like it would be it'd be silly not to talk about AI, given it's the only thing that is on anyone's LinkedIn feeds at the moment.
Yeah.
Where do you sit on it in terms of where are we at with the hype cycle? How do you see it impacting the agency client dynamic moving forward? What are your observations there?
Yeah, there's that's probably a whole big discussion, but
very broad question.
I'll try to give you the highlights. We are still not at the peak of the hype cycle. AI is amazing. It's just every day there are new use cases in your business, in your life. I can't get over the stuff that I get AI to do that I no longer have to hire other professionals to do. It's probably cut our legal firm fees in half. Our accounting, I can think of some specific things our accountant quoted on. We just had ChatGPT do it. I mean, almost every domain. It's just such a powerful. So I think it's really empowering for small agencies and small businesses, and it is the driving force that is creating a higher number of smaller entities. So you're going to have smaller startups, smaller businesses. You're going to have smaller agencies supporting them. I don't think, if we go to the big picture, I don't think, if I had to place a bet, I would bet that we never get to what they now call artificial superintelligence. And there are reasons for that. And the short of it is, one of the reasons human beings are so smart and such good problem solvers is they have free will. And you can program randomness into AI, and that's really beneficial. But an AI can't sit there and go, you know what, for reasons I can't explain, today I'm going to start thinking about this problem that nobody else has even defined before in a way that nobody has ever approached it before. So it'll never get to artificial superintelligence. We're already seeing right now what some are calling the last mile problem. It's so good. I think what we're doing is we're seeing all of the things that it can do, and it's just ramping up in the last year or so. And we're extrapolating out to like all these agents talking to each other and doing everything. I don't think we're going to get past this is a really cool tool. It's going to make a whole bunch of jobs go away that in hindsight, we're going to go, well, aren't we all better off that those jobs went away? And people who embrace the tools, who are creative thinkers, I think it's just a exciting time to be alive and to be in business.
I think it's a wonderful perspective. I read an article recently that was essentially saying that even if the technology got no better than it is now, the actual rollout and adoption probably has 5 to 10 years to go in terms of us actually using the capabilities that already exist in ways that we either haven't thought about yet, or just institutional change within organizations and within roles and whatever it might be. But it is a fascinating space. And I think that this emergence of kind of really talking about the kind of proliferation of a more fragmented industry and more indie players and smaller players. And I think even COVID kind of has had an impact on that with kind of work remotely and the gig economy. And it does feel that that's in so many ways where the space.
Some people are prophesizing like 20% year over year GDP growth. And Tyler Cowen, who is an American economist, a blogger and podcaster, polymath, he says it's like, it's never going to be higher than 5%. And the limiting factors are the things that you just cited: institutional factors, cultural issues, regulations, the inability of people to adapt that quickly. So you'll have some businesses that spurt, and you'll have some industries that kind of arrive at these step changes. But the broader effect across the whole economy, probably not more than 5% GDP growth per year. But even, if you take Western economies and you increase GDP by 5% a year for 5 years, that is significant. But we're not going to blow up all kinds of things because of it.
Yeah. Feels to me that it's, the initial Sam Altman quote around 95% of marketing roles will go, which then very quickly got walked back to be 95% of the tasks that marketers do will be done by AI. And it does feel that AI it's a task engine at the moment in many ways. And so in our agency, there's certain things that used to take up a huge amount of time, which now are fully automated or done by AI. But the role itself still exists. It's just that the person is doing different things than they once did, which is kind of the story of technological advancement over the last 50 years, where the types that are in the ad agency back in the day and the mail room don't exist, that the roles that used to take place in financial services, which don't take place because things are online, but those industries still exist and there's still people in those companies doing things.
Yeah. In my own business, the one thing that has always driven me crazy as a business owner, I'd say this to my team repeatedly, is I do not want you taking comfort in routinely solving the same problem over and over again. If you find yourself solving the same problem over and over again, and you're not automating a solution, delegating and making it go away and then moving on to the problem, then you can't stick around. We've had to let people go on that basis. And what I've learned as a business owner is the average person cannot get their head around that, because so as an employee, they think, well, if I make this, I identify with the task that I do every day. And if I make that task go away, I can't see what's beyond it.
Mhm.
And so they think there is no task beyond it. They'll be let go, but that's not how this works. You make the problem in front of you go away. There's a whole solving that problem brings into existence another set of problems. So what we need to do is we need to embrace the idea that we, instead of solving the same problem over and over again, our job really is to solve a series of currently unknown and even unknowable problems one after another. And we have to embrace the uncertainty and the mystery and kind of the wonder of all of that.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that's hard for people to do.
It's very hard. And I think that comes from a business owner mindset, right? Which I think it was 3 weeks ago in The Economist, there was an article on this very topic around how incredible AI is, but the actual impact of AI has been almost impossible to detect from macroeconomic kind of numbers. And that effect was the core reason cited, which every technological development and leap, if you're a middle manager or you're a line worker, you just view it as it's my job to keep doing my job, because if I automate it, I'll make myself redundant. When it's kind of not. If you can do these things, there will be that next challenge or that next level of value to unlock. But it's kind of hard to get people to make the thing they do redundant, because there's the fear of the unknown, right? And what that opens up, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Blair, I'll finish it with one final question. For any in-house marketers listening, what would be the things that you would urge them to do to get more value out of their agency partners?
I think I would have them recognize that the agency's superpower is the ability to think about the problem and therefore the solution differently. So even when you are self-diagnosed and self-prescribed and you go to the agency with here's what I'm looking for, you should be open and even invite the agency to think differently about the problem than the way you have defined it. And it doesn't mean you have to be dragged into some sort of diagnostic where they get paid to explore, although maybe that makes sense for both parties. But just the freedom to use their superpower to approach the problem differently than you've scoped it, because that's really where most of these businesses add the most value to your marketing.
It's a great point, Blair. Thank you so much for coming on to the Smarter Marketer podcast.
Thanks, James. I enjoyed it.